Support comes from Missouri Forest Products Association, committed to sustainable and sound conservation of the state's forests, which support more than 41,000 Missouri jobs, resulting in a $10 billion industry. ChooseWood.com.
This is St. Louis on the Air from St. Louis Public Radio. I'm Elaine Cha. Breathing is a basic autonomic function that most don't think twice about. But a deep breath, sigh, singing or maybe yelling at the top of your lungs, or just taking a breather can deliver some physical and mental relief. It can also inspire the creation of art. Visitors to the Contemporary Art Museum can now experience that with New York artist Paul Chan's exhibit, Breathers, which relies upon air and wind to create kinetic movement and evoke an emotional response that reminds us to inhale and exhale with greater intention. Here to discuss the Breathers exhibit, we have Misa Jeffereis, Associate Curator at the Contemporary Art Museum. Misa, welcome to St. Louis on the Air.
Thanks, Elaine. Happy to be here.
So Paul Chan has had a long career, primarily in multimedia art. He's been known for experimental videos, animations, working with projections. So it's art that revolves around light and sound. Then he creates Breathers, which is all about sculptures, paintings, air. Why the sudden switch up, Misa?
Yeah, so the exhibition centers on the year 2009, which was really significant for Paul. He was internationally recognized for making video work and some performance, and he said at that time he had reached peak screen, or what we may call screen fatigue, just completely overwhelmed by looking at the screen all day long. And this is also when actually he mentioned that iPhones were coming into popularity, and so the idea of carrying a screen around with you in your pocket was also really overwhelming and daunting to him. And so he decided that he would take a break from art making and to stop making video altogether. And so the exhibition traces that moment in 2009 up until now, and his shift toward moving away from video and into experimental publishing first, actually, and then into sculpture.
So I drive past CAM every day coming to and leaving the station, so I can see some parts of Breathers through the window as I pass. Now, at first glance, it looks like those inflated, air dancers, those wobbly guys by car dealerships. But other than fabric filled with air, that's where the similarities end, right? What is it, Misa, that makes Paul Chan's Breathers figures different from those flailing air dancers that we see out and about?
Yes, that's a great visual cue. It helps us. We're on the radio, but we have to try to imagine what these sculptures look like. So that's a really great cue. But he was really interested in the ancient Greek concept of pneuma, P-N-E-U-M-A, so meaning breath or spirit. So he believes that his sculptures are animated by breath or clothing for spirits. What he's trying to capture in their movement really is a particular way that we ourselves move through the world every day. So to kind of reflect back at us how we operate, how we share space with others as well. So some of them are a bit more joyful and whimsical, others are more mournful and menacing.
No, art is meant to evoke emotion, to stimulate the senses, and contemporary art often takes that further. And for some people, it's got a reputation for being kind of difficult to grasp. And Paul Chan is using a medium that is literally difficult to grasp, right? Air.
Yes.
So our team, St. Louis on the Air, has some understanding of how air works as a medium insofar as radio goes. But can you explain how air is used to create art?
Yes. Well, to make each of the sculptures, he makes many, many prototypes, sometimes up to 30 or 40 versions, in order to study how air is flowing through the shell, because he's trying to capture that very particular way of movement. So for him, it's almost like he's shaping air with these fabric shells. There are so many variables, too, for him. So the type of nylon that he's using, the ripstock, how thick it is, that will determine how it moves. The openings, the kind of holes, and the ways that the air flows out all determines that particular shape and movement that he's trying to create.
I haven't had a chance to go over there yet, but is it something akin to watching a fire? insofar as, like you cannot predict the way that the flames are going to move, but you know that the movement is going to be happening?
Yes, I think that's exactly right. Yes, so they can be a bit surprising in some ways. Paul, though, is really trying to create almost like a choreography. So for him, they should operate in the same way over and over. For him, it's almost like a video on loop. So for him, he thinks about it as a moving image in some ways.
Right.
So you'll see the repeated movements over and over if you stand there long enough.
Sure. I'm speaking with Misa Jeffereis, Associate Curator at the Contemporary Art Museum, and we're speaking about one of its current exhibits, Breathers by artist Paul Chan. I want to bring another voice into the conversation. That's Simiya Sudduth, multidisciplinary artist based here in St. Louis. Welcome, Simiya, to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
So I'd like to turn that question about air to you, too. How do you describe the way air, wind, and breath creates art?
I think about this from like a mindfulness and spirituality perspective because so much of my work is grounded in healing, like the concept of healing as well as the act of healing through creating art. So for me, my engagement with breath work as a practitioner and as a breath work and meditation teacher folds into my art because that spirituality, that mindfulness, that quiet moment is where the inspiration comes from for me, and that's where I get the messages that I need to move forward with my practice.
And how does this take form in a way that people see in your art?
So my practice is, all over the place. I use a lot of different mediums and modalities to express myself. So I do engage in public sound healing work, experimental sound with gongs and singing bowls, and I'll literally guide breath work in those experiences. But I also have murals all over St. Louis that are inspired by the tarot or inspired by indigenous healing plants, and the breath and the mindfulness and the study of these practices influence my work in that way.
Can you explain what breath work is?
So it's an intentional breathing practice. So right now, we're all breathing. We're not thinking about it. We're not telling ourselves to breathe in, breathe out. Our body is doing a great job of that. And it's amazing that our body is doing that without any coaching. But breath work is intentionally controlling your breath, to elongate your breath, hold your breath, to create a different mental, emotional, spiritual sensation.
Now, earlier we were talking about how Paul Chan's Breathers came about, and it was this need to take a break, to take a breather, to step away. As an artist, Simiya, how does taking a break sometimes help you create better or different art?
I think rest is really important for artists, like physically resting our bodies, but also resting like consumption of images or input in order to really like get in touch with the message that's coming through us and to us. And, there's just a big emphasis on production, I think, for artists in order to make a living and to stay relevant. But rest is really integral to our sustainability as artists, but also in order for our mind to receive creativity.
Now, the Breathers exhibition is indoor, and much of your art, Simiya, is out in the open, in public spaces. What is it that attracts you to public art? I mean, is it the connection to open air, something else perhaps?
The public, air is public. We're sharing air. We're commingling germs and breath all together at once. But the public and the work being accessible to the public is what is more important to me. That it's free. It belongs to the people, and everyone can access this art. And you don't have to be an artist or a gallery person. And for me, as an artist, that is my job: is to create a story and tell a story and share that message and questions with the public.
So speaking of message and questions, you mentioned that there are some murals that you have around. What is one of them that people can see now?
There's a few right around the corner, actually. There's one at Walls-Off, Washington. It is a brown-skinned peace sign hand emerging from like a field of echinacea, which is a medicinal plant that is rooted in indigenous culture. And then a few blocks from that, I have a mural of a tarot card that I drew called Queen of Wands, and there is an indigenous woman standing in a field of corn. and not as close, but I have a piece on Jefferson Avenue. It's called Justice. And these are all designs that I have been working on for years, using the tarot as my inspiration, but kind of remixing it to put Black and Indigenous people in power positions.
So, message. That's something I'd like to get your thoughts on, Misa. Paul Chan's work typically involves messaging around social justice issues. Is that true of what people will see in Breathers too? And is there some element of this exhibit that just feels especially timely?
Yeah, I mean, I think in order to do that kind of work, social justice work, you need to be able to have the headspace for that. You need to be able to rest as well. Like Simiya was saying, we're expected to labor and produce. But, I think at the heart of Paul's exhibition is the idea of the real need to allow your sensory capacities to renew. So we think about our sight and our hearing and our smell and our touch and our taste. But we have internal, they're called interoception. So your heart rate and the way your lungs are moving. That all tells you something about the way your body is functioning. And if you're feeling tired and deprived and exhausted, those functions are not at their highest level. And you're not able to do the work that you need to do, experience joy. And so he's kind of inviting us to pause and reflect, take that time.
Simiya, I want to come back to you and ask about breathing exercises, because I think going to see this exhibition is an example of what a breathing exercise could be. But explain what a breathing exercise, what that encompasses.
So there's so many breath practices depending on what you need to achieve. So there's a breath called breath of fire, where you're breathing rapidly in and out because you want to stoke your inner flame and you want to get energy and vigor in your body. But say you're looking to calm down, you're feeling anxious or maybe worried, or your health, you want to improve your health. There's box breathing, where you're breathing in for 4, holding for 4, breathing out for 4, holding for 4. And there are different breaths that when you slow the breath down, your nervous system is becoming more relaxed, your body is becoming more relaxed, and those effects can positively impact your blood pressure, anxiety, depression, your physical tension, and things like that. So the breath can be controlled to achieve whatever you really need for that moment.
Now, how is it that breathing exercises help the body and the mind when you are creating art, or even when you're taking a break, Simiya?
The physical aspect, I can feel the tension released from my body. So let's say I'm working on a mural, that's a lot of physical labor, and that is a way for me to literally restore my physical health. But the more meditative breath work is just a way for me to kind of have a little bit of sensory deprivation, which I need as an artist in order to figure out what is my thought and what is someone else's thought, and what have I been consuming, and what do I want to say. So it really helps me get clear on my messages as an artist and the impact that I want to have when I'm putting my work out into the public for public consumption.
So we've been talking about breathing as something that we do naturally. We're also discussing breathing as something that we do as a choice, as an exercise, and that it can come sometimes without some thought, but often it's when breathing is taken for granted that it becomes difficult. That includes global events, social movements, and over the last few years alone, we've faced COVID, worsening air quality and pollution, and protests against police brutality in 2020 were marked by a refrain that came directly from George Floyd's last words, "I can't breathe, mama." So how much of breath and breathing as an artistic inspiration comes from serious challenges to the ability to breathe at all, Simiya?
It's just so powerful to, follow up with what you said. It's something that we definitely take for granted. And I think when you tap into breath practices, you can see the power of the breath and how you can transport your mental and emotional state with a breath practice of any kind. And I think it's a tool that can really help us in liberation practices, because like you mentioned, social justice work requires a lot mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually, and it's a way for us to kind of get in touch with our inner like warrior or our inner light that's guiding us.
Whatever power coming from within. Misa, from your perspective as someone who is a curator, was any of that part of the consideration that you were making as you were thinking about having Paul Chan's Breathers exhibition at CAM?
Certainly, yes. Thinking about world events and racial justice, there's a particular piece in the exhibition called Ghostface, Philosophia. It's hung really high up on the wall. It's a black hooded figure. And even just thinking about the hooded figure has racial connotations, violence by the police against young black men. And so that's a piece that couldn't be shown until more recently because of an immediate connotation, I think, in society. So I think there's certainly a lot of resonance in the exhibition. I was also even thinking about what it means to be able to take a break and to pause, and who has the privilege to be able to do that, because that's, most people have to work all the time and kind of make ends meet. And so what does that mean to be able to take the time to take years off from making work?
Right. Simiya, is there any level of sort of affirmation in seeing an exhibition like this that really is focusing on air and breath?
I mean, I love it. I love when there's like kind of like the subtle mindfulness and like spirituality that's woven into artwork, because I think it makes it digestible for people. And I think signing up for a breathwork class or diving into a meditation practice can feel very intimidating, but we all have the right to breathe. We all have the right to healing and joy and good health. And I love museum settings because they're naturally meditative and reflective spaces. But this exhibition, it really causes you to like pause and think. And the breathing aspect and the fact that they are spiritual, they're clothing for spirits. I also really love that because it's a little comical, but also very serious.
Simiya Sudduth is a multidisciplinary artist based in St. Louis. Misa Jeffereis is the associate curator of the Contemporary Art Museum. Paul Chan's Breathers exhibition is up at CAM now through August 11th. Thank you both for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to us on the St. Louis on the Air podcast. Here's a little bonus for you that has to do with breathing. Simiya is going to lead us through a couple of breathing exercises. One of them, breath of fire. Lead us through one of those exercises.
Yeah, so breath of fire is a really interesting breath that you can use when you want to get energy, if you're feeling lethargic, or if you need to like build up your confidence. But before I demonstrate that breath, it is not recommended to practice breath of fire if you are pregnant, if you have high blood pressure or any heart conditions. It's a really invigorating breath that if you practice it long enough, you can actually begin to sweat. So I'm going to demonstrate it so you can hear it, and then I'll kind of guide you through it. So breath of fire is like taking rapid breaths in and out of your nose. So it'll sound something like this. So it's forceful inhales and exhales through the nose. So when I'm inhaling, I'm pulling my belly in towards my spine. Exhale, pushing out. So inhale, belly in towards the spine. Exhale, push out. And you can start slow. And then you can pick up the pace. So when I'm doing that, I'm rapidly thrusting my belly in towards my spine. It's a good ab workout.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah. And a good practice, like a minute, like I'm starting to build a sweat right now just from doing that. But a minute or two, definitely building a sweat. It's good to kind of practice this slowly at first. And there are great apps like Insight Timer or people on YouTube who could guide you through a practice if you really want to practice breath of fire.
Okay, so you know you're doing it right if there's some perspiration involved.
Yeah, and if your belly starts to feel tight, like if your abs are hurting, yes, you're doing it right.
It's the core indicator.
Yes.
So there's another one that you had mentioned that is really interesting and I've never heard of before, which is alternate nostril breath. I mean, tell us what that is. I didn't even realize that you could do that.
Yeah, so alternate nostril breath is a really great breath. You're breathing in and out of one nostril at a time. And this breath kind of has a dual purpose. In the morning, you would practice it starting on the left side through the left nostril, evening the right side. So it can have a cooling sensation. So if you're feeling like overstimulated, anxious, something like that, it can help you relax. But alternate nostril breath can also give you energy. It's not invigorating like breath of fire. This is a great breath for anybody's health conditions. So all ages, all health conditions can pretty much practice this breath. If you're having like a stuffy nose or something like that, it's going to be a bit hard. But it's a really great breath for calming the body and the mind.
Mm-hmm. And this is something you do with the assistance of a digit?
A digit, yeah. So I can guide us through some multiple digits.
Okay, sure.
So we'll start. You can take your right middle finger and like place it where the third eye would be, so in the center of the forehead. And then you can just start by taking a deep breath in and out of both nostrils. And then you're going to take your right thumb and close your right nostril and inhale through the left nostril only. Then use your left pinky or your left ring finger and close the left nostril, open the right, exhale through the right side. Inhale through the right side. Close the right nostril and exhale left. Inhale right side. Inhale left side. Close and exhale right. And so you would just keep going back and forth like that, and you end on the opposite nostril that you started with. So I started with the left, I exhale out of the right, and that's how I would end my practice.
Mm-hmm. We've had some moments on the show this week that I think afterward this exercise would have been really beneficial. Thank you so much for leading us through those. Again, there are those precautions to take if you have certain health conditions. Don't do this without getting proper medical advice if you think it might not be good for you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Elaine.
This episode was produced by Maya Norfleet.
Podcast design by Roche Hemmings.
Our executive producer is Alex Hoyer.
St. Louis on the Air is a production of St. Louis Public Radio. Understanding starts here.
Do you find yourself regularly listening to episodes of St. Louis on the Air? Suggest us to a friend you think might enjoy our conversations, and leave us a review and rating on Apple Podcasts on the App Store. It's the simplest way to help people discover our show. Thank you.
St. Louis Public Radio is a member-supported service of the University of Missouri St. Louis.
Support comes from the Missouri Forest Products Association, providing more than 41,000 jobs in the production of wood pallets, railroad ties, white oak barrels, hardwood floors, and more. Details at choosewood.com.